drink. Grab a glass, a few ice cubes, walk on over to the sink. My old lady says that I ought not to. You'll get sick if you drink that water. Red blues, red blues, red blues, baby, red blues.
So it is February 23rd, 2018. I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, and no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE in Tandanaga. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we stream live, video stream live, right here on Facebook. So if you are catching the show over the internet and want to take a look at what we're doing and what we look like when we're doing it, then by all means join us on Facebook. This is not only posted as a live feed, but will be a was live feed afterwards. So it's your opportunity to catch it. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. Again, I want to welcome you to the show. I want to revisit something that I don't normally spend a great deal of time talking about, but my opening. The reason I open the show the way that I do is it really gets down to kind of who I am and the view that I have. I've never represented myself as a spiritual person, as a shaman, or somebody who is going to be able to explain mysticism or any kind of native spirituality. That's not my thing. That's not what I do, and I'm not a person who has supernatural occurrences that that have happened to me. I've never had those experiences. I haven't seen ghosts. I don't hear voices, and I'm not suggesting that people don't. I don't have premonitions. I can't read into the future. But as I look into the past, what I've always seen in our people were a very pragmatic people who understood nature. Not people obsessed by supernatural. I think things have been interpreted in a way that when they hear our stories, creation story, the story of the peacemaker, even some of the common stories that we tell about about the characteristics of animals and that kind of thing. Oftentimes, I think they are taken so literally that we start to almost judge our Indianness on how true to believing those stories as history we can represent ourselves. And, and this gets into things, and I've talked about this before, when people say that, things have come from the Creator. And again, understanding the nature of the creation story, and as it was told to me, there's no part of that story that suggests there was one person who created all of existence, or one entity, one deity, one God. So when we say the Creator, I'm not even sure who they're referring to, unless they're just trying to, Indian up the word for God. But I look at our people not as a people obsessed with spirituality in a supernatural sense, but I look at our people as somebody as people who are connected to the natural, not the supernatural, but the natural. Understanding that there's certain things in this world, in our lives, that we may never understand. Certainly there's questions that are worth asking. What is the meaning of life? Where did life come from? Where did we come from? Which is, an ongoing debate and battle that has some other connotations associated with it. When people can say, well, Native people were just immigrants who got here before white people or something along those lines. I mean, the whole debate on whether we were originally from Africa or Asia, the South Pacific, or wherever. Or, as per our creation stories, were we always here? Always here. That's a debate, but it's a question that I don't toil with. I don't wrestle with that question because to me that's an irrelevant question, and the answer is not going to change any aspect of who we are or our culture, and it's certainly not going to make a land claim issue less pertinent or more pertinent. But the reason I say that, I don't give Buffalo speeches. I'm not going to give a Disney version of our history. I'm not going to paint everything with a picture of of flowers, and daffodils and roses. No, I tell the tough truth as I know it, without trying to make it sound like this is that my knowledge has specifically been handed down from generation to generation through a series of elders and shaman. No, that's not where most of my knowledge came from. I mean, most of what I consider knowledge has come from my real life experiences. Now, I've learned plenty from people who've come before me, and I've heard plenty of stories, and I understand much of the way the culture has played out for hundreds or thousands of years, put it that way. But how I live my life and how I apply those things, that gets into what I would consider my knowledge base. Not just what I can remember, as far as remembering something that was told to me, but how did I take the things that were told to me and apply the secondhand experiences that were related to me to my own firsthand experiences. That's the difference between knowledge and belief. Now, when I talk about mystic healing, look, I feel sorrow, sympathy, empathy, as much as anybody with the loss of life. I've had losses in my own family. I'm to this day I'm still helping in a big way with several of my grandchildren who lost their father at a very young age. I've seen loved ones and people who may not be loved ones, but people who I've grown to respect and know over the years, lost some of them, as they've passed on. And I mourn those losses. And when I see somebody who's sick or struggling, I offer my condolences. I don't offer thoughts and prayers. When I offer my condolences, I genuinely ask the question, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Or give me some hint. But I'm one of those people who say, save the thoughts and prayers, even when my family's struggling. But don't hesitate to do an act of kindness. So I try to frame the show in a very pragmatic, and I'm not trying to dog people whose lives are more spiritual than mine. That it's just not my thing, and that's not, and I don't want to misrepresent my message by suggesting that I have some higher level of guidance or something. The information that I've been able to acquire over the years, the knowledge that I've acquired, I did it the same way anybody else can. I wasn't raised by my grandmother, and I know some people that I trust immensely who gained a lot of their knowledge firsthand or secondhand from people that I would regard as respected elders. I know an awful lot of people who talk a lot about elders, but really can't cite the wisdom that they gained from people who came before them. And, so I try not to get involved. So I want to mention that, I mean, I use pretty much the same opening with the show each program. And I do it for a reason, because I do want to take the mystery out of being Native, because there is no mystery. I remember as a kid, my father was a high steel worker. So oftentimes while I had my connections to Gunawaga and where my father's family was from, oftentimes I'd be the only Native kid in a school or in a neighborhood or something like that. And oftentimes if I ran a little faster or jumped a little higher or threw a ball a little farther, oh, that's because he's Indian. No, it wasn't. I don't attribute some sort of genetic superiority or genetic superiority to physical or mental capacity. I know some Native people who are not athletic at all. I know some incredibly intelligent Native people and some people that I don't think are pretty stupid. And I've seen some pretty stupid things come out of some Native people. And you know what? And I've seen it come out of some of the ones that people want to tout as elders. Look, just getting old doesn't make you wise. It means that you avoided death. It doesn't make you wise. Not everybody who reaches those later years of life really have much to contribute. Not all of them have something to contribute. Some of them have just managed to stay alive. Now, I'm not disrespecting anybody in particular or even citing anybody in particular. But to me, the wisdom is somebody who I can look at and see their life's work. What they accomplished. Frankly, and among those accomplishments are the children that they raised and the role they played in the community, not just as a community leader. Because again, we get into this difference between whether somebody who is important to a community, are they a leader or are they a servant of the community? Are they leaders of people or servants of people? So that's why I opened the show the way I do. So I just wanted to, I revisit it because it's subject matter in of itself. Now I want to get into a couple of things. First off, one of the news items is for those of you, and I'm not going to get into all the details of the murder of Tina Fontaine, but the accused, the man standing trial for the murder of Tina Fontaine was acquitted yesterday. So in a second high-profile case of a white man killing a Native person, this time a girl, not just a young man, the Canadian courts let the man walk. So I come back to the same place all the time that, for those people who, and there's plenty of stuff on the internet right now, not just on Facebook, and the internet in general, about all, a whole lot of people, Native activists, especially on the Canadian side, talking about how, we can't get justice, we can't get justice. Well, no kidding. Of course we're not going to get justice in that system. Nor are we ever going to get justice in the American system. That's not the way their justice system is created. It is race-based. And I'm not going to do a whole show on racism, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the clear distinction between what happens when a Native person is murdered versus a white person, or a person of color is murdered versus a white person. There are people of color, young girls, who turn up missing, not just missing and murdered Indigenous women, but young black girls that turn up missing every single day. They don't just call it an Amber Alert because some little white girl was named Amber. But amber's a color. Even the color amber suggests whiteness. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a yellow hue to it. I understand what amber is, but look, they don't have an ebony alert. They don't have an ochre alert. They are not going to give the same attention. Look, luckily within some of our own networks, and I know a lot of Native people are real diligent when they find out that somebody's missing, a Native girl is missing, about sending it through our own networks. But we don't show up on those Amber Alerts. Little black girl's not going to show up on an Amber Alert. But let a little white child turn it missing, and the whole world goes crazy looking for it. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm just talking about the distinction there. We are not going to get justice in their system. So what's the solution? Well, one of the solutions is stop trying to use that system. But the other thing is we need to be more vigilant, I guess, and we need to take care of ourselves better in terms of not leaving ourselves in as prey for people who would do us harm. I know that's hard. That's easy to say, and it sounds like what you're saying is you're like we're almost victim shaming or putting the blame on us for putting ourselves in bad situations. I'm not saying that, but we have to know the reality. We have to know the reality of life, and because the system is not fair, because we are not going to get justice in the U.S. courts or in the Canadian courts, We cannot depend on those systems to dole out justice. So what I'm suggesting is that we look after our own a little bit more. And and I know it always comes down to the same thing. I say it all starts with family, it goes to community, and I mean those things. We have got to empower ourselves more, but embrace ourselves more at the same time. With this shooting in Florida, a lot of people are, obviously there's a large debate over guns, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the second part of the show. But the other question that comes up is, why are we letting our kids be raised by other people? By a whole system that is, one, not very safe, and that's evidenced not just by these gun shootings. I mean, look, public schools, even these private schools, are not. We've had our children molested, raped, assaulted by staff of the school and by teachers. And I'm not just talking about residential schools. I mean, you hear time and time again, whether it's a woman or a man who's a teacher or instructor or a staff member having sex with underage students at a school, and we keep sending our kids there. We keep hearing story after story about somebody who ripped off a school, stole $30, $40, $50, $100,000 worth of dollars, money from a school system. It's in the newspaper. It's on the news every week. You're gonna hear another story. Yeah, we keep sending our kids there. These institutions are corrupt, almost every one of them, and it doesn't matter if they're headed up by priests and nuns, or whether they are for-profit education systems, the private school system, or whether it's public schools. They all have a level of corruption. It's built in. It's systemic. And that's not even talking about how much danger our kids face at the hands of other students. And there's this ongoing debate about whether a child should be suspended when they act up. I'm seeing video after video, on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter of kids that are threatening teachers and I've seen some of the physical abuse. And some of these kids are not just small kids. This isn't just some 13-year-old, trying to throw haymakers at a grown man or a grown woman. Some of these kids are big. I mean, you look at the size of some of these kids who are playing football and basketball, and I'm not blaming football players and basketball players. I'm just saying from a size standpoint. I got to tell you, when we were in school, we didn't see students with full beards in the 11th grade. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying that, we weren't getting hair on our faces at that age, but there's something in the water that's making some of these kids seem a lot more grown up in 11th or 12th grade. And of course, they've been empowered by the media. They've been empowered by, again, by white privilege. Or they're empowered by the anger they have towards white privilege. Because it's not just, I'm not saying that schools are dangerous because of white people. Look, in the inner cities schools, they've become hotbeds of violence and threats, bullying. I mean, there's all these laws in the books, for bullying. It doesn't change anything. And I'll tell you, the irony of a school talking about adopting anti-bullying and anti-discrimination laws when there are still schools in the United States, including in New York State, that are allowed to have mascot names like Redskin and Warrior and Savage and Brave and use Native people, using a live, present, existing people for their own entertainment and enjoyment as mascots, as names, as nicknames. I mean, what could be more racist than that? But try to convince people who say, well, that's their history now. They've been calling themselves the Redskins for so many years that the hell with us for claiming that that it's somehow offensive. No, in fact, they want to own that, even to the extent that we say, no, that's not yours. Oh, yes, it is ours. We've been calling ourselves that for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. You can't take that away from them. And that's how much they want to own our images and the slurs that they've used for us. I mean, look, these schools are not providing futures to everybody equally. You know, they're a holding pattern. It's where you put your kid until they're 18 years old. So the question that I ask, and I ask that of anybody, not just Native people, when do we recognize that it's a failed system? You know, I hear all the numbers. You know, in the Buffalo School District, it's something like, I want to say the numbers have been somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per student is spent in the Buffalo School District. A failing school district, a district that performs, you know, poorly, not just poorly, pitifully. I mean, the American school system, you know, the education system in this country, you know, is something like 30th or something like that in the worldwide. It's pathetic. And yet we're going to send our kids there to be educated. And I'm not even blaming the teachers. It goes beyond just the teachers. And of course, so these become places that are ripe for, it's been 18 school shootings this year already. We're not even done with February yet. 2 months of the year, almost in the bag. And there's been 18 school shootings. You know, of course, there's been shootings and other incidences, you know, that have taken place outside of schools. But this is, I mean, we're essentially giving the custody of our kids to somebody else. You know, for, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Every single day. We don't know most of the people that our kids are interacting with, not just the other kids. We really don't even know the faculty and the staff that well. I mean, we may do a little bit of research when it's time for our kids to go to college to find out more about that. We just say, what's the school that's local? And that's where our kid goes. So the serious question has to be asked about homeschooling and about, you know, and again, most native territories are not in any big hurry to take over the institutional education of our kids. So what are the alternatives? Look, I mean, to teach them the stuff that they're supposed to learn in school, we can do that easily. I think what people worry about is, well, what about the social engagement? Well, look, I understand that. But not all of that social engagement is good. Some of it's damn poor. Some of it is very, very negative and has very, very strong negative impacts on our kids. Look, when you're on the in crowd, when you're one of the the popular kids, yeah, life can be great in high school. But if you're one of those kids on the fringe, struggling to be accepted, or they're on the receiving end of bullying, or struggling academically, not getting any joys, out of sports or any other stuff. If you're one of those kids, it's not such a pleasant experience. But we've convinced ourselves as adults, and we've convinced our kids, no, that's it, you just have to. Your future depends on it. At some point, we got to rethink some of that. Now because of these shootings, 18 of them so far this year. Now, the president of the United States thinks putting a gun in the hands of as many as 20% of teachers is the answer. I'm not sure that if you mentally evaluate these teachers and their circumstances and the anguish that they feel, not only because of whatever else may be going on in their life, but the anguish they feel associated with their jobs, they may be some of the more volatile people. and you want to put guns in the hands? Look, the shooting in Parkland, Florida, the sheriff outside, the good guy with the gun, didn't stop this shooter, this mass shooter. He didn't stop him. And you know what? Everybody's throwing him under a bus. But consider a guy who's retirement age, probably figured, okay, I got an easy way to finish out my career as a sheriff. I'm not going to turn him into Barney Fife or anything like that, with one bullet in his gun. But, he, an older gentleman, and here's gunfire in there, and he may only have a 6-shot revolver in his holster. He's there as much for show, and intimidation, I guess. Show and intimidation as much as anything. But anybody thinks that this guy, with the inability to determine how many shooters there were, but hearing fire, shot after shot after shot after shot ringing out, not knowing if there's 1 shooter, 2 shooters, 10 shooters, anybody who's going to sit there and say that guy should have busted in the door and shot this kid, I don't know. Wasn't there. It's hard to assess that. We can all say what we would have done, but we don't know until we're in that situation. And hopefully nobody ever has to be in that situation. But again, these are the environments we're putting our kids in. I think we've got to rethink. We've got to rethink what it is that we want to take place with our kids for the first 18 years of their lives. I mean, it used to be, all right, we had them until they were 5, and then we put them in the schools until they were 18. But now we got pre-K and Head Start. We're putting our kids in the hands of somebody else. 3 years old. Daycare, a year old. So we're putting our kids in the hands of other people at these earliest of ages. We are playing less and less of a role with our children in terms of shaping them, in terms of educating them ourselves. We're not handing down culture if somebody else is spending most of the time teaching them. We're not handing down culture. I don't know, parading a kid, putting a ribbon shirt and moccasins and parading them through a powwow isn't teaching your kids culture. I mean, we have to do more. We have to do more. And, and I'm not saying put this on, tribal government either. I'm not sure that they're equipped to handle these situations either. And I'm with these situations, I mean the situation of educating our kids and nurturing our kids, fostering their mind as well as their body. I mean, doing all those things so our kids, can be whole and complete. Look, I mean, I'm a big fan of school athletics. There's got to be other solutions to that other than thinking we've got to, ditch our kid for 13 years of their lives or more. Homeschooling is a choice, but I mean, maybe there's working groups that we need to put together. But, of course, what's the obstacle to that? Well, I've got to go out there and make that dollar. I've got to go put my 40 hours in, my 50 hours in, my 60 hours in. And so does the mother of my child. Both parents are so obsessed with filling up that checking account that they can't be bothered with teaching their children. We've got to rethink the priorities in our lives, folks. And of course, among those priorities has to be how we view the society around us and what we expect or don't expect out of the society around us. Look, we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'm going to weigh in on some of this gun debate that's been going around. Maybe I'll have some thoughts that you don't expect coming from me because of the flag hanging behind me or whatever. But no, we'll have a conversation. I'll offer my thoughts when we come back after this. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
Did you ever cry out in the pouring rain? Did you ever feel your life slipping away? Did you ever feel like you're going insane? awake at night, praying for daylight.
There was a song came on the radio, a guitar instrumental, and it changed everything.
Link Ray, it's rock and roll.
Rumble. Yeah, that's the one.
Rumble.
Hey, Rumble!
Rumble had the power to help me say, I'm going to be a musician.
And then I found out that he was an Indian.
The music that we know here in the United States is fully supported by input from Native and Indigenous people.
So there you go. This is John Kane from Let's Talk. I will be hosting an encore screening of Rumble, the Indians Who Rocked the World, Wednesday, February 28th at 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons, 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. Come join us. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. That is my promo for the encore screening that I plan to do in New York on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons in Brooklyn, New York. If you're in the neighborhood, by all means, stop by. It's a free screening. We have a great conversation with these events. We usually, go even beyond what the subject matter of a given film or whatever the event is that I host. I do host an event in Brooklyn on the last Wednesday of every month, for the most part, with some exceptions, but for the most part, last Wednesday of every month, I host an event. And it may be a screening, could be a speaker, could be a musician. It's been a number of, I've had different kinds of events over the last few years. So showed the film last month, at the end of the month, and then I showed it in November, actually, out in Long Island. And great feedback from the people who came out to see the film. Great interaction, great conversation after the film as well. I'm anticipating another fairly packed house at the Brooklyn Commons Cafe Event Center, and I look forward to it. So if you're in the neighborhood, or if you know anybody in New York, if you're here in this area in Seneca Territory, or listening online wherever, if you have some friends in New York, tell them to stop by. Tell them to come by 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, and join me on Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'd appreciate it. Hey, look, I want to thank my sponsors for not just this program, but for the program that I do in New York. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as I get into the gun debate. But I couldn't do this show or the New York show if I didn't have the financial support from my sponsors. So I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped the program continue to educate, entertain, and inform for the last 7 years. We are in our 8th year. And by the time summer comes along, we'll be punching into our 9th year. So I'm going to thank all of you for stepping up, for joining the fight, for doing your part, and helping us not only do what we do today, but help us get. I want to thank you for helping us to get here. So I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I also want to thank CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcast of our show on the Gway in Tandanega, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, Indigenous Resistance Radio, and any of you who share the program. And, of course, we are Facebook Live, so you can share the live event as we're doing it. Afterwards, you can share the event after the fact. It stays up there on Facebook. I post the audio on SoundCloud, and I post the links to that on my group pages. That's both Let's Talk Native and Let's Talk with John Kane on WBAI. The links are there. We take the video, and we create a YouTube video with it. That usually goes up by tomorrow. And so all of you who share the SoundCloud audio, the YouTube video, the video on Facebook, all of you who do that, I want to thank all of you, because that's how we get more people engaged in the conversations that we're having here. So, I want to thank you for that. And just a reminder, our YouTube our YouTube channel is Let's Talk Native TV. And I encourage you to go there and subscribe, become a member, and then you'll get notifications every time we do a video. and of course we put the videos up from the shows. I also want to mention we Facebook Live not just this show. And so when I encourage people to check out my show in New York, I post the videos from that show, links to the live broadcasts, which are Thursday mornings from 10 till noon on WBAI. That's 99.5 on the FM dial in New York City. But you can watch those shows as well. And, this past week, actually, because of travel issues and preemption due to a fund drive, I actually recorded my show on Facebook here in our Seneca Nation Territory studios, rather than making the trip to New York. So, look, it's not just Monday and Friday. I have a 2-hour show every Thursday morning from 10 till noon, and I encourage you to check that out. The interesting thing about that show is it is a New York City show, and it's a talkback show. We'll take callers, sometimes as many as 10 or 12 callers during the course of a show, and it allows me to engage the listening audience in ways that I'm not quite equipped to do right here. So anyway, it's a show that I think you should check out, and of course I have guests and that kind of thing on the show as well. In fact, this week I plan to have Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who is an author who I've had on this show and on my show in New York before. She's written an Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, All Real Indians Have Died Off, and 20 Other Myths About Native Americans, and a new book called Loaded, which is a disarming history, a disarming history of the Second Amendment, and it's related to how everything has been taken out of context about what the Second Amendment really is, and that's a good opportunity for me to segue into what I plan to talk about for the remainder of the show. But Roxanne will be joining me on my program in New York on Thursday. So if you want to hear an author of a really important book on the subject, and one who's done research on the Second Amendment, its history, where it comes from. She makes a kind of a startling statement in her book that the Second Amendment was actually about enforcing slavery. There's a direct connection to the passage of the Second Amendment and the slaveholders of the that were the founding fathers of the United States. So if you want to check that out, you can join me on my show in New York on Thursday. But look, every time one of these shootings takes place, there's a knee-jerk reaction where the people who are the most outraged, the people who lost loved ones, raise hell. Politicians tap dance around it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it was Clinton, Bush, either Bush or Obama, or now the moron that's in the White House today. They some more than others will try to make political or earn political points with it. I mean, Donald Trump just spoke at CPAC just yesterday or today, I don't even remember. But I mean, he basically stands up in front of a crowd within a week after a mass shooting at a high school and is telling this crowd of conservatives, you've got to elect more Republicans because the Democrats are coming for your guns. They're going to eliminate the Second Amendment. And the thing is, there isn't even ever really a proper analysis on what the Second Amendment is. It is not just the right to bear arms. I mean, it is a right that the United States committed not to infringe upon. But there were some, there's a disclaimer there, and it talks about the need for people to be armed against tyranny, not armed to protect their possessions. There's nothing in the Second Amendment that suggests that, or even self-defense. It is about tyranny. That's why it mentions, the well-regulated militia part. It's to stand up against tyranny. Well, here's the one thing. Even with AR-15s and semi-automatic, Mini 14s, Uzis, AKs, HKs, whatever out there, all the pistols, with your Tech 9s, all that stuff, with all of these guns, everything you can find on the video games, with all those guns at your disposal, you are not going to stand up against the U.S. military. And the idea that they have militarized police forces in the way they do. If a police force puts its designs on you, I mean, look what they did to the folks in Philadelphia during the MOVE folks. They literally blew up a residence. They firebombed and blew up a residence with people in it. This country has no conscience when it comes to what they're willing to do. And from a military standpoint, let's keep in mind, this is the only country in the history of the world that has dropped nuclear weapons on innocent people. Innocent people. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, those were cities. Those weren't military bases. I'm not saying there weren't military bases there. But they eradicated civilians. The United States did that. And they did it at a time in the stages of World War II, August of 1945, when in March of that same year, they had already firebombed 5 other major Japanese cities in the largest aerial assault ever perpetrated by anybody on the planet, including Tokyo. So when people, will teach your kids in school again about how marvelous the red, white, and blue is, and America is a standard bearer for democracy. Well, they're also the country that dropped nuclear weapons on innocent people. So if you think going to your local gun show and stocking up your war closet, your gun safe, is going to somehow enable you to withstand the tyranny of the United States, well, then you've got a poor game plan. That's not what the Second Amendment was for, the Second Amendment wasn't so an 18-year-old kid could walk into a Walmart or a Dick's Sporting Goods and buy an AK or an AR-15. That's just not what, or a Mini 14. I heard some people saying, well, Mini 14 is not an assault rifle. Just because it doesn't have a pistol grip, it still shoots .223 ammo, military ammo. You can still put a clip on it. Look, people keep talking about 30-round clips, 60-round clips. The whole idea used to be to take a clip and you tape them together. So when you use up 30 rounds, you just take it out and turn it over, and you got another 30 rounds. So, but they actually, you can go to a gun show, any of these conventions, and you order them online. You can order this entire rotary canister that you can put over 100 rounds in. So you can put a 100-round clip easily on the bottom of a Mini 14 or a AR-15, and there's no reason in the world the average Joe, mentally stable or not, should have that kind of stuff. And look, I'm going to tell you right now, I had an AR-15, and you know why I had an AR-15? Because I was defending our territory from the outside. And at some point I realized, well, this is kind of silly. I'm not really going to win a gun battle here against federal marshals or the FBI or the CIA or anybody else trying to defend some little 32-acre territory in Oneida. But I had it. I walked into a gun store and bought it. And I had large clips and lots of ammo, all that stuff. I mean, this is coming out of the 80s when we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought that anything was possible, and we needed to defend ourselves. So, look, when I say defend ourselves, we were defending against tyranny. That was the plan, and I wasn't the only one with a rifle like that. And today I don't own a gun. I don't own a gun. If I needed one, I could get one. Even though, actually, legally, I'm not supposed to have one because I'm a convicted felon of the U.S. justice system. But you know what? I don't need a gun to defend my family. I don't need a gun to defend my home. But let's talk about what happened in Florida, because here's where the lines get drawn. When I hear people say, "Well, they keep saying that only white people are responsible for these mass shootings," well, what about Chicago? What about Detroit? What about this city or that city or whatever? Well, let's mince this a little bit. Let's parse this out a little bit. A mass shooting is not the same as many shootings. Gang violence is not the same thing as a mass shooting. So even the drive-bys that happen in Buffalo or, like I said, Detroit, Chicago, that's not the same thing as a person grabbing a gun and just mowing down innocent people because, for whatever reason, because they're trying to start a race war. shooting a bunch of black people in a church, whether they have a vendetta against an ex like the church in Texas, or whether they're trying to start some other kind of conflict by mowing down people in a movie theater, or whether it's some kid who felt like he was bullied or was bullied and got himself worked into a frenzy that he for whatever reason he thought he needed to take it out on other kids. Whatever the case may be. I mean, there's no justification for it. But a mass shooting is when an individual or a couple of individuals arm themselves with the intent to kill a bunch of people that they may not have any connection with whatsoever. Innocent people. That's a mass shooting. Many shootings are what takes place in some of this urban violence that people talk about. 90% of the people, or 90% of the time, maybe even higher than that, but by and large, the perpetrators of mass shootings are white men or boys. They're white guys. They aren't gang members. That's a different kind of violence. Look, I'm not saying one violence is good and the other one is, bad. Look, it's all bad. But if you're talking about trying to end these kind of mass shootings of innocent people, gun control is the appropriate answer. It just is. And then when I hear people say, well, more people are killed by vehicles than by guns, and we don't want ban vehicles. You know what we do with vehicles? There are thousands of laws in the books that make vehicles, and they change every year. There's more restrictions on manufacturers on how to make a car safer. Back in the old days, they used to have these big, gaudy hood ornaments on the front of a hood. You know why they don't exist anymore? It wasn't just about style. It was to make it safer. Because people were being impaled by the Mercedes star before they decide, well, we're going to make it so it collapses, or that Cadillac emblem. And they're still being laid open by those things, or the swan on the front of a Packard or whatever. They did away with those things so they were safer. So if you ran somebody over, it would be safer. They've also changed bumper designs. They made bumpers softer. It isn't just about protecting the driver. It's about protecting the pedestrians. So there have been thousands of laws put in place, that the manufacturer had to follow to make vehicles safer. Not just seatbelts and airbags. Thousands of, the entire design, crumple zones, energy absorbing systems into the framework. The way an engine drops down, the angle that a motor mount is set on a motor is designed so if on a forward collision, that motor drops down and doesn't come through the firewall. Everything from gas fuel tank design, all of that stuff. Valves and stuff like that, all kinds of shutoffs, so a car is less likely to burst in flames. Like in Hollywood, they all blow up. In real life, they don't. So that's just on the manufacturer. On the operator side, you have to be tested, a written test, an operations test. I mean, there's trainings. You have to be a certain age. There's restrictions on what that license may or may not entail. You have to renew that license every so often. And you have to make sure that your disabilities, are listed, including, eye tests and that kind of stuff. You can have that license taken away from you if you if you have any kind of physical ailment like seizures, or if you're, get convicted of DWIs. So that's on the operator side. Again, on the operator's vehicle, that car has to be registered and re-registered. It has to be inspected. It has to be insured. It has to be insured for liability. Guns aren't insured for liability. So it has to, now trillions of dollars go into the infrastructure to accommodate motor vehicles. Trillions of dollars of roads and highways that are constantly being improved to make them safer. guardrail technology, the lines on the road. It's all about trying to make it safer. The banking, the shoulders, the speed limits. Trillions of dollars goes into the infrastructure to make those vehicles safer. And here's the final thing. More police time is dedicated towards to the monitoring and observation of motor vehicle operation than any other part of their jobs. Where do you see a state trooper? Where do you see a county sheriff? I'm on television. They're all busting down doors and cracking the latest cold case. Well, that's not the reality. The reality is they're writing speeding tickets. They're sitting at a stop sign to make sure that you came to a complete stop. They're scanning to make sure your seatbelt is on, and they're scanning to see that your car has been properly inspected. That's what most police officers are doing. That is the bulk of their work. So the next time somebody wants to compare, the laws relating to driving versus the laws relating to the gun ownership. Wow, if guns if guns were regulated even a half of the way motor vehicle operation were regulated, then you'd eliminate some of this stuff. And you know what? High performance cars, you don't have open wheel race Formula One cars on the highway. You know why? Because it'd be dangerous. Putting a AR-15 or a AR-15 with a bump stock in the hands of a John Q. citizen because of their Second Amendment rights is like saying that anything goes on the highway. You can have unlimited speed and power on the highway. And so there's no comparison between the two. So my feeling is, I think assault rifles should be banned. Flat out, I think they should be banned. And when I say assault rifles, I mean any gun that you can just keep pulling the trigger and it's only limited by the size of a clip, because somebody will come up with a clip that'll hold 60, 80, 100 rounds. And you know what? Even shotguns are considered. I mean, if a shotgun has can chamber over 5 shells, it's considered a riot shotgun. That's just a description. That's an assault rifle. I mean, and of course we can get into pistols and the size of those clips. And the dangers that the thing about pistols is they can be hidden so easily. I don't know how the hell a kid walks into a high school with locked doors, and they have to be unlocked from the inside with a loaded AR-15. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how somebody just not let the door get open. But I know how I could see how somebody could get in, get through some door monitor by having hidden pistols in their under the jacket. So I got to tell you, I know that the NRA buys politicians left and right, Democrats as well as Republicans. I mean, when I hear Donald Trump say, "Well, I'm going to do what no other president before me has done," look, there's a reason that Obama didn't get any legislation passed after the Newtown massacre. It's because the Republicans blocked it. I mean, there's no excuse for. I mean, there is no excuse, for an 18-year-old to be able to go in and get their hands on on a semi-automatic military-style rifle. The non military version, I guess, or the domestic version of an M16. Just shouldn't happen. That's my view, and I know people don't necessarily agree with that view, and that's why I want to put that out there. I feel as strongly about fighting, and I mean fighting, for Native rights as anybody. Now, having said that, good luck coming onto Native territory to grab the assault rifles that may be here, or any Native territory. That'd be tough. But I gotta say, there was a recent post on Facebook. New York state employee, who seemed to be upset with Seneca's having issue with fracking water being dumped into the Allegheny River. And he said something along the lines, maybe it's time for a bunch of armed Trump supporters to go down to the Seneca Nation and show them who's in charge. Well, I got to tell you, if you're stupid enough to try something like that, be careful what you wish for. Because our people have been oppressed. Our people do know how to shoot. And they're not going to go into a high school and shoot up a school or go into a church. But I guarantee you, if a bunch of rednecks show up here, ask what happened when the KKK tried to go into Tuscarora territory back in the in the heyday of the KKK. They got their asses kicked. And you know what? Michael Johnston from the New York State employee, please come down here and show us who's in charge. I would love to see that happen. So I got to mention that. Hey, just before I go, I did see Black Panther. It is a film that's worth watching. I think it's a great film. There's some problems in the film. I don't know why they had to have a CIA agent, a white guy, in there. He's not the hero like what they do with every Native film, but he does play a prominent role in one that I think was unnecessary as a film. But it was good to see that film, the way it played out, the number of black actors, the people who were in front and behind the camera. I look forward to such a film being made that isn't just based on fantasy, but that has a little bit more reality to it, because I think that plays well. I think anybody who questioned whether a black film can be successful, they've been proven wrong. Look, Eddie Murphy and Will Smith and Denzel Washington proved that wrong already, but now names you may not have ever heard are proving it wrong in this film. I'd love to see a Native film done the same way. But I do want to remind people, Black Panther is a Marvel comic book superhero. There are some real heroes called Black Panthers, many of whom are serving time in jail for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And those are people who have really stood up and not just represented a story, but have represented some truth in standing up against injustice. So when you go to see the film, when you go to see the Black Panther, just remember there are some real Black Panthers, and they are doing some good work in terms of trying to see real justice being doled out to people. So I want to put that out there. All right, this is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Again, check me out in New York on Thursday, and I guess first we'll be back here on Monday. So we'll see you Monday. Yahweh.
She gave me the world, and the universe agreed. She gave me a heart, that's all that I need. She was my best friend, but I couldn't see. She needed a good man. That man was me. I wasn't thinking, I was a fool. She was right there beside me, but I was still cool. It's almost too late when I realized what I had, what I denied. She gave me the world and the universe.